we will go ahead and get started here. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our April SOFA seminar. My name is Lauren. I run our events program here at PERQ. If this is your first time joining us, welcome. It is always such a good conversation Mohammed has with our guests. And if you are returning, thanks for joining us again. Today, we will be speaking with Daniel Paulino. He is Bozzuto's VP of Digital Marketing. Him and Mohammed, our EVP of Marketing here at PERQ, will be doing a deep dive into digital marketing. We're going to be learning how to spend our advertising dollars, where the best place to start is, how to manage your growing tech stack, and how to create a cohesive digital brand. During this session, we do ask that you guys add questions either to the Q&A feature or the chat feature. Mohammed will do a good job of feeding those in during the session, or we will answer those at the end when Mohammed and Daniel are done. Expect this to last around an hour, and during that time, Mohammed and Daniel will be going through some questions, so please stay focused, and we do have poll questions to keep you guys engaged. So after that, Mohammed, go ahead and get started.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining me today, and thanks, Daniel, for hanging out with me on this Thursday afternoon. It's nice to chit chat today. So for all of you that joined as well outside of Daniel, one, I appreciate you taking some time out of the middle of your week. I know Thursdays can be equally chill while also having that specter of Friday and the end of the work week hanging over you. And I know lots of stuff to catch up on. So I appreciate you taking some time and hanging out with us today. And to the 50 of you who got the DoorDash gift cards for lunch, I hope you got something cool. I'd love to see what you grabbed for lunch in the chat there as we go. So today we're chatting about digital marketing, which for those of you that have been to these sessions over the past year, you know I am obsessed with this particular topic. It is near and dear to my heart. It's something that I kind of can geek out on a little bit. And I'm really excited to be chatting with Daniel. We talked for the first time earlier this week, and I instantly saw that he is another one of those really deep dive, return on investment, ops-based marketers that really knows what he's doing. So I'm excited to kind of pick his brain a little bit today, and we're going to chat about a variety of topics. A little bit about general digital marketing, brand, tech stack. That's a big one, right? With all the new tools popping up over the course of last year, and also we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about the more, I'd say, admin side of digital marketing, right? So figuring out ROI, aligning what you're doing with your company goals and vision, and making sure that you can really take that from the top down. Another interesting thing I think about this particular session is Daniel is at a corporate level, right? So we're going to be looking at this from the perspective really of how you can support these efforts all the way down from the corporate level down to the property level, right? And I think that's one that's really helpful, especially for me, because as a marketer, throughout my career, there are certainly times where you want to be able to talk to the guy above you, up, at the top of marketing or ops or finance. Make sure you're doing a good partnership with them. And it's really helpful sometimes to be able to ask someone who is not inside your organization those questions that you may not feel comfortable with face-to-face with that counterpart inside your organization, right? So we're going to get started. Daniel, let's start with question number one. And we're also going to do a simultaneous poll at the same time with the rest of the crowd. So Lauren, if you can pop poll question number one up, and then Daniel, while everyone's getting on into that, we're going to talk about starting out in digital marketing, right? We're going to start at the beginning and just talk about what's the best place to start, right? Are we talking about websites, social, email marketing? There are so many different channels out there that you could be using. You give an advice, where do you start at if you can only do one thing?
Sure. Well, Mohammed, before I answer the question, I want to say thank you for having me. I really appreciate you inviting me today, and I'm happy to be here. In regards to where to start, so, obviously it depends on the individual organization and where you're at in your, your track. Are you starting out, or is it, have you been around for a while? I think for anyone that's really starting out in regards to uh, promoting their properties or their communities online, the best bang for the buck in order to get awareness and build awareness and just get your name out there is really going to be in your ILSs,
Mm,
because they have such prowess when it comes to SEO and just awareness and just you know um, so many prospective residents start their journeys on the ILSs. So I really do think it's a great place for that top of the funnel. Again, for people starting their journey, I think once they kind of start their search, they're going to be going to more lower funnel places such as your website. But I think it's absolutely can't overlook the ILSs.
absolutely. That is one of those things that I think certainly many of us had a thought, right? It's like you have to have the ILS, but then to your point as well, that next step really is probably that website, right? When they do get lower funnel, make sure you've got that really solid. We're going to get a little bit into tools probably a little bit later, but really none of those matter if you can't start with a solid base to put those tools on, which is a good website for your property or your company. So we got some results back in here, and we've got a lot of people using email marketing. Here's one that is very surprising. So social media, 100%. Got 30 out of 30 people say we're on social media, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter. I have a follow-up question for TikTok later in this one specifically, because I see lots of folks on Facebook. I see lots of folks on Twitter, but I gotta say, the number of properties I'm seeing on TikTok, it's hard to find them. And I'm wondering if maybe I just don't know how to use TikTok well because I'm a cusp millennial. But most people using email marketing, and then let's say right behind that, the ILSs are right up top, and a nice spread here with content marketing for blogs, videos, infographics. I know video in particular is a big one that jumped up quite a bit over the course of the past year. I think we're based on what we've got here, actually is going to guide our conversation a little bit, especially when we start getting some of the SEO and PPC stuff. And curious, if you mentioned other, which we've got a small number of the respondents that just said other on there, you could pop those into the chat as well. What are you using that you don't see inside of the listing of the poll there? So let's transition from that, because you mentioned the ILS, right? You mentioned getting to the website, and I think that gets to a piece of brand, right? If that's the first or second place your potential renters are going, bottom of the funnel, to really learn information about your business, from your perspective at corporate, what would you really like to see on a property website that, since you're seeing so many of these, is going to help get those people where they need to go?
Great question. So as I mentioned, a lot of prospects, they start their journey on the ILSs. That's what they come across first. Then once they've narrowed down some properties they're interested in, they're going to definitely visit your website. So what that is a great opportunity to drive home with a prospect what's different about your community or about your management company. What sets you apart from the rest, right? When you're on an ILS, there's so much noise, there's so many communities, you're kind of overwhelmed. So once they arrive at your property website, that's the best place to tell them more about what your community is all about, why it's better to live, why should they live there versus anywhere else. So you get to tell more about your story. So I would not overlook that opportunity to really talk about what makes you different. Is it the location? Is it the service? The amenities? A lot of people do, a lot of communities do talk about amenities. So I would really focus on what the living experience is like. I think that can't be overlooked because it could set you apart from the rest.
That's a really, really good point. I think the amenity listings and some of those basics are, people put those out front a lot, right? And they are to some extent table stakes, right? There's only so many Starbucks coffee machines you can put in the lobby before everyone has a Starbucks coffee machine, which love it, love the idea, love the pools, love the workout facilities. I think those are things you're looking for when you come to a property, but you're right, it is about that story of who you are. And I would love to see more people really pushing that to the forefront. That's some really great advice. Now,
Absolutely.
when you're telling that, right, there's kind of a writing messaging perspective there, and um, creating that personal voice or that personality, right? We talked in the last session about how every community really kind of has a personality of its own, right? It grows based on the people that are working there, based on maybe some of the pre-work you did. It was when you were creating that community, and then also based on the residents that live there, right? It kind of takes on a life of its own. You're going to control that from a corporate perspective. You want it to have personality, you want it to have voice, but like, how do you do that? And how do you keep it consistent across multiple properties? You guys have a ton of properties through Bozzuto.
Right. So the consistency is difficult, right? When you have so many different owners and just the brands that were developed. You know, at Bozzuto, we refer to ourselves as a house of brands. So all of our
Mm,
communities have a unique identity that's been developed. And so it's really telling that story. And really, you know, Mohammed, as you mentioned, you can differentiate yourself on your website. You can find that value proposition. But we have to also keep in mind that prospects are not just going to look at your property website. So if you are saying that we provide the best living experience, amazing service, yet you're not paying attention to your reputation management and reviews on Yelp or on Google or
mm,
things. And so your website goes on and on about amazing living, great service, you know, we really take care of our residents, and yet you're not responding to reviews and the reviews aren't great. That really completely invalidates that message that you've been sending. So authenticity is important, and really matching what you're saying with what the consumer can find elsewhere is absolutely important. Otherwise, it can completely devalue your message and make it seem like there's no consistency between what you're saying and what they're finding on other channels.
wow. I love anytime I hear a marketer use the word authenticity. Right? That's so key, right? It is, yes, you're crafting and telling a story, but that story really needs to be true to what the reality is. And if you're not walking the talk, it will show in your renewal rates. I unfortunately remember that from my first apartment in college. It was not what I was promised when I signed that lease.
Yes, we've all had experiences.
Um, so so we've got the ILS taken care of. We've created this like great brand website that really talks a lot about why our property is different, what differentiates us. It's got the basic things on there, right? It does have the amenities. It's got the floor plans. It's got some way to contact us, some conversion methods going on there. Great storytelling. Now you're starting to layer tools on there, right? Like we
Right.
mentioned before, you got to have a great website first, right? That's your house. But then it's like, how do you furnish that house, right? What's the curb appeal on that house? What's the furniture you're putting inside there? How are you moving people through that experience? And that's where all these different tools come in. And last year was insane as far as the number of like tools popping up in multifamily. We
Yes.
had to have them,
Yeah.
right? I mean, we were chatting right up before this about how both of us spent most of our time in the office. We're at home now.
Right.
That's the case for lots of other people. We had forced quarantines across the country. We had to find a way to get prospects in the door without all those physical means. And lots of really amazing tech companies came in to try to fill that space and fill some of those needs. It's time to kind of step back a little bit, right? And say, let's look at these, let's figure out what we're going to hold on to, what we're going to consolidate. In some instances, what tools are working with each other that maybe we didn't even realize. How can we connect those? When you're strategizing tools to use in your tech stack, and I know you do a lot of this, what's your decision-making process look like behind like what you choose to invest in versus not?
Sure, that's always an important topic and something that we talk about often because, as you said, there's no shortage of tools, and it's easy to get the what I refer to as a shiny light syndrome. There's always a new technology. You know, us digital marketers, we absolutely will geek out at all the new tech, but you know, bottom line is it really there's two kind of main driving points that I would say would be extremely important. One is what does the prospect need? What are residents looking for? So you have to have continuous research in what's important to them. And also, secondly, where are your business pain points? So it's not about just, hey, there's a new
Mm,
tool, let's test it out. Is what am I actually in the prospect's journey? What am I trying to address? Where are we the least efficient? Where do we have bottlenecks? So Mohammed, I'll start with the needs of the consumer.
mm,
So, having that research is helpful, right? Because you can again start with a tool-led approach, and that's like, okay, there's new chatbots or there's these new widgets that are available. But when you really think about it from their standpoint, and you do research, you may come up with a different answer. So we've done a good bit of research over the last year and really looking at our prospects' journeys, both on our website but also on Bozzuto.com. And one of the things that we've seen is that consumers these days have an obsession with floor plans. They spend
mm.
a lot of time looking at the floor plans. So if I'm going and looking for some kind of widget to plug in, is that really meeting their needs? What we're finding is the websites that have the best floor plan experience are capturing more of their attention. They're staying on those websites longer, and having that insight is extremely helpful. As an example, on our corporate site, what we noticed is, hey, our floor plans were actually pretty far down the page. You'd have to scroll
Mm,
down multiple screen heights to get to that. So we're still in the process of actually changing that, but that insight has been key, because we actually saw that visitors to the website are spending much more time looking at the floor plan than the gallery images, than the 3D tours, and much more than points of interest and the map for the nearby neighborhoods for each property. So when you
right.
take that approach, your answer might be different than what's the newest tool that's out there. So what we've found is that there's really not, I mean, that's not a tool approach. That's something we need to change in the design of our sites and make it a better experience. And then across, as you mentioned, we do have a lot of properties, and all the websites, they're different. They're not all in the same infrastructure. So some of them have what we've kind of started calling them internally first class versus the economy floor plan experience. And those are quite different. So what can we do on the ones that are the economy and make them better? Because we know that prospects are really spending a lot of time there these days. And second part of your question, or what I mentioned earlier, was in regards to what's the needs for the business, right? So we can
Mm-hmm.
look at all the newest tools and the newest technology that's out there, but I prefer for us to kind of think about what do we need. And there's all kind of technologies out there, but when we really looked at our entire kind of journey for our prospects and the entire conversion process, what we've noticed is um, where we're lacking or where we need the most help is in the lead nurturing. It's after the lead's already in, right? The
Right.
Our colleagues at the properties, they're extremely busy. They're giving tours. They're helping to clean up after the tours because of COVID protocols. They have residents coming by to talk to them. They're quite busy, and they're not able to follow up with leads as quickly as we would like. So for us, that's one of the main areas of focus, is how do we leverage technology for that first touch point? And I'm not talking about autoresponders, because those are kind of one dimensional. We're
Yes.
looking at technologies that help us really engage that prospect and help them to convert into a tour, because that's one of our main kind of bottlenecks, and one of the areas where we really want to leverage technology. So that's why our focus is there, because that's the business's need.
That makes a lot of sense. We had some conversations. We took the show on the road a little bit and did one of these for the NAA last year, the virtual thing. And a big topic of conversation that came up on that was the fact that at that point in last year, the big challenge wasn't really how many leads are we capturing, because I think people had spent a lot of time over the course of the year really drilling down on their websites. There was no choice, right? At that point, it was like you said, how do you make sure you're nurturing those leads that you've got and really turning them into some good opportunities for your property and for your organization? And that's a whole new, like, different skill set um, that is specialized and worth spending the time on. You spend all this money through the ILS, through SEO, through PPC, through print, through email, all these efforts that people mentioned earlier today. You get them to the website, you get one interaction, but maybe they're not quite there. They need a little bit more of a nudge, right? And there's so much opportunity left there. We've got a couple of follow-up questions on the floor plan experiences from Alyssa and Rachel. They're kind of like combined, so I'm gonna squish the two of them together and ask you a two-part question. All right. So the question was, when you say good floor plan experience, do you mean like Matterport or nice looking 2D floor plans, that sort of thing? And then the second question for that was, are you seeing a difference between 2D and 3D floor plans?
Great question. So when we defined what were those, because we really did an in-depth study across, actually we did it across 30 different websites, stabilize, lease up, different suburban, urban, etc. What we noticed was the websites that captured the engagement, or kept the visitor's attention for the longest time frame, was those floor plan experiences that they were able to actually find what they needed quicker. They were able to use filtering. So it's really
Mm,
not, for us, what we found, it was not so much around the actual Matterports or the 3D tours, et cetera. It was really just the two-dimensional images. Of course, some of our websites are a little bit more custom. So they have a 3D view of the building when you can kind of, click on a specific floor and then see the available units in that floor plan. That's a really nice thing to have, but that's really not what drove it as much as the filtering capabilities and just the quality of the images and the amount of information they were able to see about the floor plan, the dimensions, how many units are available of that particular floor plan type. And we are able to do a much better job of that when it's a more custom website. When we're using some of these vendors where it's kind of plug and play with a infrastructure for the backbone of the website, then it's not as customizable, right? And so that limits us. So those websites are great. We can launch them quickly. There's much less of an investment for clients to make for those types of websites, but from what we're seeing, they're not providing the value that a more
mm,
custom site does and captures the attention. So the time on site was almost double for the websites that had really what we call the first class floor plan experience. That was just a name that we came up with towards the end. It was not a strategy that we had, but really seeing the differences was key. And it helps us to illuminate those differences to clients and talk about, here's where we could be investing. This would be a great area to invest in making a better website, because the user research is telling us this is really resulting in much better KPIs for us.
that makes a lot of sense. And I think that actually answers a little bit of the second question, or third question that just came in on this as well, which was, what do you recommend for properties that have 20 plus floor plans and navigating prospects getting overwhelmed? And that filtering sounds like a key component for something like that.
Yes, absolutely. The filtering is key. We honestly, we have properties that have 50 different floor plans. So it gets to be really complex, but having great filtering, having filtering suggestions, that's something that we're really looking at. We've done some benchmarking in other industries, and Marriott.com has been one where we've really been looking at. They've got suggested filters. And
Mm,
so those are things that that normally a prospect wouldn't filter by. They would normally filter by 2 bedrooms or 3, or budget or availability. We're looking at adding different filtering suggestions, such as, is there a den? Does it have a flex space? That kind of thing. So those, we haven't quite gotten there yet. We're still doing research on that. But, absolutely reducing the noise, whether it's 20 floor plans or there might be 25 different 1 bedrooms. There's buildings that are like that. So you have to help the prospect with filtering, that they can get down to what exactly they're looking for and help them to identify the differences quickly. Because although we look at floor plans all the time, prospects don't, visitors don't. So
yes.
you kind of get lost, right? It is 2D, it's pretty simple, but when you're not looking at floor plans every day, you kind of spend a lot of time trying to understand what's the difference between one and the other. So highlighting that
Yeah.
in you can is absolutely beneficial. And it really changes the perception of your website and what you're doing to help them filter through that noise versus your competitor.
I love that. I think not only filtering through the noise, but then also to your point, there are lots of people who are not looking at floor plans regularly, let alone have the floor plan and also the ability to walk through it and know what they're dealing with. So, you know, it can be difficult for someone to look at a floor plan and understand what that means to them, right? Do I have space to put a desk in here? I don't know. What does 6 feet mean? Who knows, right? So some of those like custom filters and suggestions are good. I also love your idea of kind of looking at adjacent, I'd say kind of marketplaces, right? Whether that be the hotel industry, which, you know, suffered just as, you know, just as badly, if not possibly worse during COVID. They also had to do, you know, instant ways to figure out how to do very clean keyless, you know, bookings and that sort of thing, and how to help someone figure things out, right? I mean, they were in the same situation, except for unfortunately they didn't have people on actual leases for a year. Once you were gone, you were gone. But you're right, they made a lot of improvements over the course of time. And then also in the residential real estate market as well, that's been booming quite a bit recently as folks started trying to find larger spaces, either larger apartments or larger homes, right? And trying to find some of those things as well. You know, do I want something that has X number of bathrooms? Do I want it to make sure it has these sorts of features as far as offices, dens is another good example. So I love the idea of looking outside of our own little bubble, right? And trying to find some things that we can borrow, because there's always something to learn there.
Absolutely.
We spent a little bit of time on a little bit of the strategy, and I want to probably do one more there before I go into implementation with teams, and then our favorite topic, ROI. Right? We'll kind of like bring up the tail end on that one. But when you start talking, you mentioned about having to make sure that you align your tech decisions with the company goals that you're trying to achieve. A lot of properties have like annual goals they want to get to. So, you know, percentage of occupancy, maybe converting a certain percent of the website visitors into leads, et cetera, if they're really like drilled into digital marketing. How do you like position and change your digital marketing efforts to help meet those goals? Because they can change very rapidly sometimes, even if you're trying to set them annually.
Right, absolutely. So, Mohammed, myself and my team were at the corporate level, so we developed a strategy for this, but it really is up to the our colleagues in the rest of the marketing department that are actually more of the, you know, regionally focused on their specific portfolios. But what we do as a whole is we have a what's called a yield management process. So we really understand where, you know, where in the lease up phase or stabilization, what's the occupancy rate. So we're always looking 60 days out and really trying to predict how many leads we need based on the individual property's conversion rate. We never want to look at a corporate level conversion rate, right? Because there's urban properties, suburban properties, where we have properties in all different markets. And as you know, COVID has definitely highlighted where urban areas where people are moving out, and then other areas where people are flocking to. So we never want to look at a corporate either source or just overall digital marketing lead kind of conversion rate. We want to look at what's happening down at the property level. So I know if one property has a higher conversion rate than another, then they can use that in calculating their needs for new. So we're absolutely looking at it that way. And of course, we're also looking at their 60-day out. So
Right.
what's, you know, how many people are moving out over the next 60 days? And we use that. So we have, you know, a lot of templates and kind of models that we've developed that allow our regional marketing managers to input all of those numbers and then really understand how that can impact the choice of the budget. You know, so are we ramping up or are we decreasing budget, but also channels? Because if you don't need as many leads, but you still want to be relevant, then you're thinking more of kind of upper funnel awareness marketing and channels that will help you with that, such as, you know, display advertising, right? But if you're
Right.
for those quality leads that will convert sooner, then that really helps us to inform how how we optimize the mix of the budget.
I love it. I like the idea of the 60-day, looking out 60 days, because great to set annual goals, great to set quarterly goals, but that like moving target, it takes a little bit of time if you're adjusting marketing in particular. You gotta do copy, you gotta do creative, you gotta deploy that out there. Best case scenario with an amazing shower moment with the best idea, right? And a designer with free time, you're talking about, best case a week and a half start to finish to get it deployed, but in reality you're probably talking about a couple of weeks there, right? So looking 60 days out gives the opportunity to still, I think, adjust a little bit as you need to there. We've got one other question in the Q&A, kind of around like the analyzation of tech stack versus website conversion. I think this is an interesting one, right? Is that idea of, as you're adding tools onto the website, are you measuring the website? Are you measuring the tool? Is there a delineation, or is it the same thing? Is it one and the same? And the question here is, so if you're adding a tool, they mentioned PERQs, there's also plenty of other like conversion tools out there on the marketplace as well that are tied into kind of the lead generation portion of the website. If you're putting it on there and you are kind of starting to retire a little bit of the static, traditional like contact form type of things, those are going to lose traction. The more interactive ones are ideally going to start collecting more leads. How do you delineate success there, or do you?
Absolutely. Yes, we absolutely do. And this is one of my favorite topics. I'm a huge proponent for A/B testing. So I'd love to kind of dig deeper into what I mean by that. Traditionally, in this industry, what we've done is plug in tools to the website and then do what I refer to as historical analysis. So we plug this tool in. What was the performance for the last 90 days? And then what was that versus the same 90-day period a year ago, or even the previous 90-day period? As you know, I think the last year has been such a great example of how fast markets can change. There's demands so there's just too many different things that there are variables that are at play. Demand changes, concessions, pricing. There's just so many macro factors that can change that trying to do a historical analysis is extremely difficult to isolate. Why is the performance either better or is it flat? So I'm a huge proponent, and this is something we've been doing a lot over the past year, is concurrent A/B testing. So what does that look like? Well, when we're evaluating some tools that you plug into a website, whatever widget it is, we're actually cloning the website, making two versions, one with that tool or that widget and one without. And we have tools that allow us to split all traffic that's going to the website, whether it's organic, whether it's paid, all traffic splits. That way you have the clearest kind of black and white way of determining whether or not the tool was worth it. Did it provide lift? But secondly, is that lift, is the ROI there for the lift, right? Because it might provide a 5% lift, but if you're paying $300 a month, $500 a month, is that really worth it? You have to look at that at the property level. That's not something that can be determined at a corporate level. So that's something that we talk about frequently. I think it's really the best way. It's very, very difficult, Mohammed, any other way. It gives you clarity. And so one of the things I suggest, if you're going to go that route, is really internally understand with your team, what are the metrics? What are the KPIs before you even launch that? Because what ends up happening is there's inherently going to be some people that are a bigger fan of the technology, some that are less. And if you get at the end of your 90-day or 6-month evaluation period, if you had not already come to an agreement on what the success metrics are, it becomes very murky. And then you have, well, I think it did drive value, and others are saying that. So it kind of puts you at a standstill. So I really recommend to come to that agreement beforehand, lay out what your research plan is. And that way it's completely objective and doesn't have anybody's bias inserted into the process.
I love that. I love that. And Renee, thank you for that question. I 100% agree on the A/B testing thing. That is, if you are doing anything online with digital marketing, A/B testing is crucial. And it's one of those things I think a lot of marketers know about. There are some tools out there. There's a follow-up question I want to ask you on that one as well here. But it's also one of those things that gets overlooked a lot, right? We talk about A/B testing. We don't always do A/B testing, right?
Yeah.
But one of the questions here, Tiffany popped one here up, following up on what you were saying there was, do you have any recommended software or programs for A/B testing traffic to your website? Because I think one of the big reasons that marketers, even those of us who love A/B testing or really data-based marketing, one of the reasons we don't do it sometimes is not knowing what the easy tools are to actually deploy it,
Right.
making that split happen. So you have any suggestions there from a multi-claimant
Sure.
perspective?
So, there's a lot of tools. We currently use Google Optimize for a lot of it. But some of the A/B testing that I mentioned on this conversation in regards to cloning your website, they're really actually, for those particular instances, we're actually not using Google Optimize because it's just one version has the widget or the bot or whatever it may be, and the other version doesn't. So then for the
Mm,
splitting, there's a ton of tools. I've used many in the past. Some are free. We're currently using one called Nestio, but honestly, it's really a commodity pretty much. There's so many different ones out there. I'm not necessarily saying that one's of the best use. That one just happened to be the one that our partners who develop all of our website were the most comfortable with. So we went with that one because of that. That was
gotcha.
not because it was necessarily a better tool. So, but when it comes to actual conversion rate optimization tools, there's Google Optimize. In the past, I've used convert.com. I've used Optimizely. I wouldn't say that one is better than the other. You just have to figure out what is your team most comfortable using, because at the end of
Yes,
the day, the value is what you get from it and the insights. It's not so much the tool. So there's not one that I will say I think is better than another.
agreed. Agreed. Yeah, there's a lot of really great ones out there. I've used the same ones you've mentioned over the course of my career as well, and certainly Cosine most recently, Google Optimize. That's been it's pretty straightforward for folks that are already comfortable in that Google suite of analytics products. It's
Right.
easy to deploy. If you're not, then you might want to, once again, like you said, find one where you feel most comfortable. That's really the key thing. The easier it is to deploy it and manage it, that's the important thing, not which tool you're using, because they're basically all doing the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And if I can add one thing, I think what supersedes the tool is the strategy behind it. It's the methodology. It's the agreement with your colleagues and your team of what you're going to test and what the purpose for the testing is. That is much more important than the specific tool itself.
Mm, agreed. Agreed. I was a strong cosine slash retweet on that one for sure. You mentioned in your first portion of the answer there when you're bringing up the A/B testing, making sure that like the key metrics were set before you go into some of these both evaluation of tech tools and then also A/B testing type of scenarios. Um, as you're doing that investment in the tech, website advertising, et cetera, like what are the key metrics that you feel like every property and organization globally should be looking at?
Well, we could always say that at the end of the day, if it, lead to lease is a huge metric to look at. But it depends, honestly, Mohammed, on what what your pain point is. What are you trying to address, right? Is it lead acquisition? Because then if it's lead acquisition, then lead to lease is not the metric that you're looking at, right?
Mm,
So it really depends. And so it's difficult to say without really understanding the specific business needs and what we're trying to accomplish. But for sure, by and large, many of the tools that we're looking at, it's actually the lead to lease conversion. So it's, we understand how many leads we got through this, through the tool or the widget, whatever it may be, but are those leads better than the leads that didn't come through that specific technology, right? So
yeah,
sometimes we create a lift, a specific technology will create a lift. So it looks like, and we actually have a case study like that now that we're working through, where on the version of the property websites that don't have the tool, they're not getting as many leads as the versions that do. But what we're seeing as you look through the entire journey, right? That's why you don't want to have just one data point, because that data point would lead us to a different decision than what we're seeing when we look at the entire journey of those prospects. So what we're seeing is that while we're getting more leads through the version with the tool or the technology plugged into it, when we look all the way through at how many people are actually taking the tours and then how many are converting to leases, we're seeing that those leads are not converting to leases at as good of a rate. So from a financial perspective for us, but also, more importantly for our clients, it's actually better not having that specific technology on our websites. So that's why I'd encourage everyone, don't just look at one data point, look at the entire journey and make sure you're really evaluating that, and you and your teams are convinced that that's the way that you need to look at it, because only the one data point could lead you in a direction that is not as good for driving your KPIs.
Yeah, and that gets to your point earlier in this conversation as well around lead nurture, right? So sometimes more leads is not, sometimes more is not more, right? Sometimes it is. And I think, one thing I even, see on my side, operating PERQ.com and other like e-commerce websites over the course of my career has been sometimes more leads is just noise. And sometimes more leads is an opportunity to create more conversions on the back end if you spend just a little bit more time with nurturing those and adding another thing. I mean, I've certainly seen instances where, literally one follow-up can dramatically increase conversion rates.
Right.
And I've certainly myself made mistakes in my career where I've looked at it initially and said, it's not right. And I haven't looked at ways to maybe like continue tweaking that funnel in the middle and just kicked something out the door. I've also spent more time on tools holding on to them than I should a couple of times early in my career as well. So it's certainly like a balance.
That absolutely can happen when you don't establish beforehand, before you've launched. Before you launch a new tool or technology, if you establish beforehand, how are we evaluating? What's the research plan? What exact metrics are we looking at? And by the way, I would also suggest always using some of your own metrics as well. Don't just take the data that the vendor is providing you. I think vendors, they're providing you the data. I don't believe that any vendor is purposely misleading anybody. That's not at all what I mean. But they don't always have the full picture, right? They're not integrated into your entire stack. So they can give you data points that they're seeing, but without the full context of all of the other data that you're collecting in your other systems, that picture can look really different.
That's so true.
To your point in regards to lead acquisition, Mohammed, I think that's something that we focus on so much and we talk about is lead acquisition. How's that going? And we always want more leads across the industry. What I say to my team sometimes is we don't really have a lead problem until, by and large, throughout our portfolio, we're working every single lead. So yes, we can always get more leads and more leads, but if we're looking and we're seeing huge unreviewed queues and the leads are not being worked, then is that really what our problem is? Or do we need to find ways to leverage technology to reach out to all these leads, to nurture them and take them further down the funnel?
Yes, so well said. So well said. So I'm hearing this over and over again from marketers, right? We are used to, when we're deciding those metrics and trying to nail down what we want to goal on, we're used to looking at historical data, right? Trailing 12 is a decent standard. If you're going to be really like good at like looking at trends, maybe you're looking at a trailing even 2 or 3 years possibly, right? Seeing what those seasonal trends are, et cetera. So you can plan ahead of time. What are you doing for the fall? What are you doing for the summer? What are people going to need? You can make some projections based on that, right? That's a little bit of a mess right now. And I know you joined Bozzuto in the middle of COVID, basically, right? All that data from last year over the past 12 months, it's an anomaly. It's an enormous anomaly, which in a normal case, when you're using statistical models, you just throw out the anomaly, right? And you use the rest of it. But this is an anomaly that has future impact to buying and renting behavior forever.
Absolutely.
Like, how do you manage that? Like, what are you doing to kind kind of control those variables inside of that very dirty data set that you've got or that everyone has right
Right. That's a great question. Absolutely. As you know, seasonality has changed completely since almost a year ago. So, and as you said, Mohammed, I think that this is going to be a phenomenon that we're going to be experiencing for years, because when you look at, for example, fall and so
now?
far this year, we had a record-breaking fall and a record-breaking winter for our portfolio, and I'm sure many others have experienced the same thing. I'm still seeing pent-up demand in the market. You know, currently we're ramping up into the traditional spring leasing season, but we're seeing more leads and more demand than we ever see in spring. So
Mm,
how is that going to play out years from now? It will continue to, because now you're going to have people moving out and looking for apartments in different times of the year than it is, you know, different from historical. So absolutely, that's going to be something we're experiencing. So, you know, we always want to understand the marketplace and what's happening in the changing season. So the historical perspective is always there, but you don't want to rely on that solely. You want to look at your data, what's happening now. And, you know, a good example of this is late summer last year. You know, that's the time of the year when things start to wind down a little bit for us for the fall leasing season. And what we were seeing was cost per click, the changes on cost per click, you know, the prices kept going down, cost per click
mm,
kept going down. So it just was saying that advertisers really were not putting their money in the market yet. They were still very concerned. And so advertising
right.
industry, of course, are our own competitors. So we saw the CPC trends kept decreasing. And so we actually looked at that as an opportunity. And we made recommendations to our clients to, let's actually ramp up spending, because the demand is still there. We're still seeing good click-through rates. In fact, click-through rates were actually increasing from over the
Mm,
summer, but CPCs were at an all-time low, at least for the past 3 or 4 years. So seeing that, that tells us there's not enough dollars in the market. Otherwise, the CPC would increase. So
right.
we actually made the recommendation to a lot of our clients to bring forward some dollars from that were budgeted later in the year and use them in that late summer, early fall. And that was, it proved to be a great strategy for us. We had lead acquisition and cost per lease acquisition that was extremely efficient compared to what we were historically had experienced. So, you know, that's why I would really recommend, you've got to look at what's happening now and not just focus on past trends.
That's very, very true, really smart. We're gonna look forward a little bit right now, and then Molly, I see your question in there as well. We'll get to that also in a moment here. I'm going to ask you a question. We're going to do this with a poll as well. Lauren, if you can pop up poll number 2 for me. So there's a lot of internet trends kind of come and go. The internet was considered a trend at one point in time, right? TikTok's an example of that, as you just saw in the poll up on the screen there. Tools also come and go.
Right.
And right now, I think for the past, we've been looking very much, it's kind of almost triage. I have this problem. How do I fix this problem right now? I would love to hear from you kind of long-term techniques as far as like, what types of tools do you think people should be investing in from a long-term perspective in multifamily, tools, techniques, et cetera? And how do you really determine whether or not this is long-term or fixing the problem right now?
Absolutely. So I think a key thing to focus on is really understanding your prospects, right? Understanding not just the overall consumer trends, but within your, you know, your prospect pool. So, you know, we obviously do research and understanding consumer behavior and the changes overall in the, you know, nationwide across consumers in the multifamily space that are looking for apartments. But we absolutely do research within our portfolio as well, specifically on our property websites and on Bozzuto.com. So a technology that I'm really a huge fan of, there's a vendor that I've been using for some years in this industry and in others, called Full Story. And what I really like about Full Story is, unlike a lot of other analytics that tell you which parts of your website people are engaging with, where are they falling out, what are they clicking on, what are they not clicking on, Full Story actually lets you get screen recordings. It's a simulated screen recording, so you're not actually installing anything on anybody's computer. But when they go onto your website, whether it's mobile or desktop, they're actually the code snippets for Full Story are actually recording, and you can see a simulation of everything that your users are doing on your site. And that is, I can't underestimate the value of that, the insights that we get from it, of actually looking at users' experience across our property sites and across Bozzuto.com. There's really not a dollar amount that we can put on that, because that's what gives us insights into how we should change the design of our sites to really meet the needs of the changing consumer. And that's something that we've really benefited from over the past year. The insight I mentioned earlier in the conversation about their obsession with floor plans and what they're
Hmm.
engaged with and not, that really is extremely powerful. You know, we previously had been spending a lot of time and resources in developing our maps with points of interest. And what we notice, and all the plugins that have to do with that, and all the choices of what kind of points of interest do we show across our properties, what we notice is our consumers are not at all engaging with that part. So it
Oh,
told us
wow.
we're investing in an area that doesn't really matter and doesn't provide us return. But we previously to that, we're not using this tool. So that tool gave us the insight of really, you know, in a world of finite resources, both time and money, is where we should be investing. And that's something that I would be a proponent of. I don't think that's a flash in the pan that's going to disappear. Knowing your consumer, I think that's a universal thing in marketing, and that you should always invest in.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So we're gonna wrap up here, and I'm actually, Molly, gonna use your question as our last question that I'm gonna ask for today, because I think it's a great place to wrap up everything you've done. You've given us a lot to think about from the perspective of like where to start with as far as deploying your funds, how to choose good technology partners and tools, how to implement them, how to measure them. You've talked a lot about A/B testing, a lot about return on investment, those sorts of things, right? Some of our favorite topics. Molly's question really wraps it up. So I appreciate some of the tools you've mentioned at different points to use for things like A/B testing. And her question is, what tools do you use to track success and measure ROI? She says, we struggle with having data spread across many different platforms. You mentioned a little bit about that a minute ago on the vendor versus internal data piece, and captioned in various ways that aren't comparable. They're not really apples to apples. So it's often hard to see the context on what we're seeing. What are you using to bring all that data together and get the holistic view that you're using to make decisions?
That's a great question. That's absolutely one of the challenges. As you've got your PPC running, and you've got, you know, across it, of course, paid search, display, you have paid social. There's just so many different avenues. You have the ILSs sending you leads, your property website, your corporate website. So it's 100% a huge challenge. We leverage data warehouses. So, you know, we actually, as an organization, we use Snowflake, where, you know, it helps us to bring in data from all the various sources, you know, our CRM systems and other systems as well. And then in regards to digital marketing data, we specifically are using funnel.io. It's a really great technology that helps us aggregate all of that data. Of course, now you're bringing all the data in, what do you do with it? And that's where we invest in business intelligence and visualization tools. I can't stress enough how important those are, because when you've got all the data aggregated, you know, you don't want to be downloading it into an Excel spreadsheet and having you know, everybody having to analyze it. So building dashboards with business intelligence tools that you then put those in the hands of your regional leadership, of your regional marketing managers, and everyone can download and kind of slice and dice the data how they need to. That's going to help them have that conversation with clients about how to change their marketing mix and their budget. That's absolutely a huge you know, benefit to have that. It's something I would really invest in. And of course, there's going to be organizations that are going to be limited because of the cost of these tools.
Yes.
But we, you know, with, for example, Funnel.io, our investment, I would say it's not very substantial on a yearly basis. When I look at the costs of that, it's really low compared to the benefits that we get from it. And with visualization tools, there's various out there. You know, some you can probably get at a very low cost compared to, buying licenses and kind of the older method to that. These days, these tools are all in the cloud and you're paying per seat. So it's really not a huge investment. I think the biggest investment is making sure that you've got everything plugged in and that you're able to leverage that data.
That's awesome. And that is a great place to wrap up there. I am curious about the TikTok thing, if you can pop it up, Lauren, and also the anonymous attendee who pointed out that I forgot to put neither or don't as use options for TikTok. I probably also should have added, I use TikTok, but only to watch things and not post anything. That's me. Thank you for submitting that. Looks like we've got 77% of people who are using it personally, and just 2 people said that they use it for work. 1 person said both. So potential emerging area. My 13-year-old daughter would suggest to go all in there, but we'll see how that goes. Thanks to you for joining me today, Daniel. It was a really great conversation. I always love chatting with really focused digital ROI-based marketers.
It was a pleasure. Thanks again for having me.
Thank you. All right, let's kick it on back to Lauren.
Yeah, so Daniel Mohammed, thanks again for hopping on and doing this session with us. It was so good. For tools like we chatted about, like Google Optimize, SEO, Full Story, Funnel IO, all of those, we will be doing a follow-up blog that will include a full recording of this session. So those will all be listed as resources in that blog. As well as on that blog, we do post the full blog as well as little content snippets on our LinkedIn and Instagram. So if you guys could go give those a follow at PERQ Marketing on both of those, that would be awesome. You guys can catch clips of Daniel and our past sessions on all of those sites if you guys are interested. We do these every single month. And next month, we will be hosting this on May 15th. So stick around for that. You will get information on that session in our follow-up email. But again, thank you guys for joining. You guys will get all of this information post-session, and we hope to see you guys next time. Bye.
Bye.